In this lesson, we're going to take a look at some important elements of drawing hair. And the first thing we're going to take a look at are types of hair, just some general types of hair. Of course, there's a lot of hairstyles and a lot of ways to do one's hair, short hair and long hair and this style, gelled styles and so on. We're going to look at some basic styles and just some core theories about strand types that'll give you a good start to building up your repertoire, and you can really, of course, use reference to try out and draw these multiple hairstyles. The first thing we want to look at is people with wavy hair, where their hair tends to rhythmically move in waves constantly, right? And it's not quite wavy enough to be curly, but there are a lot of waves in their hair. And so the first kind of hair type we want to be conscious of is hair that is very wavy. And in this instance, this is more of a female hairstyle, although of course males can have it as well. A lot of times you will see that this particular look is done with a hair straightener, in adding sort of extra waves into the hairstyle itself. All right, so we've got wavy hair, right, and we have rhythmic waves of opposing curves happening throughout the hair. The next type of hair that we want to look at is straight hair. And straight hair, as its name implies, is for the most part straight. It lays fairly calmly on the top of the head, and it kind of comes down, and it may have a little bit of a wave or two in it, but they're very large arcing waves, and for the most part the hair is pretty straight. Usually thin hair is like this. It's thin, so gravity affects it more easily, so it's kind of because it doesn't have a lot of body to it, and because it's thin, it's kind of like a weaker sort of hair, I suppose. I hope that's not an offensive term. And so it kind of bunches together and it's just pulled down by gravity. It can't fight gravity as much as thicker wavy hair can, and of course curly hair. So it does have a few waves, but the waves are kind of a bit more subtle, and so this is straight hair, right? And then you get people with curly hair, of course, curls to various degrees. And usually the curliness could, of course, cover their whole head. But some people with curly hair have sort of straight hair that then starts becoming curly. And curly hair is really defined by consistent and perpetual curliness happening everywhere in the hair itself. So I'm just kind of doing more of a directional kind of guides with curly hair here. But of course you can have short curly hair, long curly hair. And the idea is that the hair is constantly trying to bend and curl. All right, and we want to show this with a lot of opposing curves happening as the hair is moving about. And this can go even further into smaller curls, or into hair that is intentionally curled, which usually takes on this type of look to it, where you're seeing this bending and actual looping in the strands of the hair happening. So these would be the curls perhaps coming off a girl's head or what have you. Okay. And then of course we have short hair, and short hair styles obviously more common in men than women, I would say. It's where the hair has been cut, and because it's been cut, there is no gravity to pull the long strands down. So the hair tends to be spikier and spikes up more if the hair is quite short. So wherever the hair is short, it would spike up more. And of course, we're not talking about gelled styles or anything like that, but it can be brushed back and whatnot. But the key thing to remember is because it's shorter, it has a bit more of a fuzz to it, because there is no additional strands pulling it down, so it will spike up a little bit more. And of course, we can go so short that someone has no hair, or just, you know, little spikes for hair. So we want to be aware that there are a multitude of types. Now, you might be saying, well, that's quite obvious, but for new artists, especially, generally they tend to draw one particular type of hair, which is probably the worst way to draw hair ever, and we're going to get to that in a moment. And it looks a little something like this. All right, this is really terrible, really bad. Let's use this model. They'll draw hair like this because they've watched possibly too much manga or something, watched too much anime, mind you, and read too much manga, and they're trying to imitate that particular style by sawtoothing the heck out of the character's hair and just drawing this very dull, lacking in looseness type of style. Please do not do that, right? Consider the type of hair your character has, wavy, straight, curly, and so forth. This is short, mind you. I don't know why I put straight there. Consider the type of hair your character has, and then implement the hair in a logical way, using reference where you need to, if you want a particular style, or you're just not sure of how that particular hair type on that particular individual looks. All right, so that's why I wanted to emphasize this, that there are degrees of curvature in the hair, degrees of spike in the hair, based on whether it's short, curly, straight, or wavy. Please do not do this chunky look. Just get that out of your system right now. Do not do that. All right. Now, moving on, I want to discuss strand types, because the top 4 examples are more about the general curves you will see in the hair, but we also have types of strands when we're building on top of our masses that we want to implement. And we're going to look at 4 types of strands. And the first strand is a pointy kind of strand, which looks a little something like that. And we have another type of strand, which looks more like that. And we have this type of strand. And then we have this type of strand. Okay, and I'm going to label them and explain them to you as we go. So this first type of strand is called a pointy strand. And it's characterized by being broad at the back as it goes back into the mass of hair, and narrow at the front. All right, it's very pointy, it's very sharp, it looks like a sharp tooth or a sharp spike or something, and that is the pointy strand type. Next we have the tapering type, and it's called tapering because it tapers at both ends. All right, and this is good for little loose additions of hair, which we're going to cover some basic hair shapes just now as well, which we'll come back to this one. But for example, if on this first wavy model here I want to put in an extra little piece of hair, the tapering hair type is quite good to doing that, because it shows that the hair kind of originates from a small quantity of hair and then kind of fans out a little bit and then it rejoins itself again. All right, so the second one we have here is tapering. Okay, the third type we have here is a straight strand. Okay, a straight strand, or a straight group, I should say, grouping of the hair. And it's defined by having a curved shape on the one side and a straight, a curve on the one side and a straight on the other. And if you really are into drawing manga, a lot of manga hair is actually defined more by this straight strand or clump shape than it is by the pointy shape, where the character's hair might be quite straight and it comes down with a lot of curves against straights like that. Okay, so there's a lot of curve against straight happening with the straight strand type. Let me just go over these in a different color, just because I feel like all of the red is making things quite hard to see. And then the bulbous type here is having a mass of hair that is tapering on one side and quite broad in the middle. All right, before it tapers a little more on the other side. Okay, so it looks like a bulb. Like a bulb from a plant, right? Bulbous. So it's a bulbous type of hair strand / hair clump where it kind of comes out. And these are our very basic strand types. I say strand not in terms of individual strands, but more in terms of the mass strands that you'll end up drawing, because you won't really draw individual hair strands. Well, you might at times. And these are the 4 shapes that we want to start becoming familiar with. It may seem, and I say may, it may seem overly simplistic, but trust me, when you're in the heat of the drawing hair, knowing that you have these 4 tools to work with is very useful. So keep hair types in mind and keep these strand / clump types in mind when you're drawing hair. In the next lesson, we're going to be looking at some basic hair shapes that are kind of like shortcuts, but let's say little foundations that you can build on to get very complex hair designs. So let's move on to the basic hair shapes lesson.